Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a little bit of shorter-term technical analysis on Bitcoin because in today's video, we actually have a very interesting move coming out of Bitcoin here because as you can see, over the last 24 hours or so, ever since I recorded yesterday's video, Bitcoin has actually managed to form a very strong rally moving from a recent low of around $3,880 all the way up to where it finds itself now, just a little bit over $4,000. Bitcoin has had a very good last 24 hours or so and has rallied quite significantly, which is interesting because over the last couple of weeks, Bitcoin has been rather neutral or indeed bearish. Ever since back over here halfway through March, Bitcoin had been trading sideways and then it moved bearish over the last couple of days. And even I've been talking about, as well as most other YouTubers in the cryptocurrency space, have been talking about bearishness for Bitcoin and the potential for Bitcoin to break a bearish and start moving towards lower price targets. Because if we look out at the daily chart, for example, Bitcoin's been moving to the upside for so long. We have things like the weekly stochastic RSI crossing bearish. We have a lot of different technicals pointing bearish for Bitcoin. So it's very interesting that Bitcoin comes and rallies here like this over the last 24 hours. So in today's video, I want to dive into why exactly that's happened, some of the forces that may have caused that move to happen, and where this leaves Bitcoin moving on into the next couple of weeks. Is Bitcoin bullish now, or is this just a short-term little bounce, giving the bulls a little bit of a recovery before the bears take over again? We're going to be discussing all of that and more in today's video, guys, and I do think we have a good one lined up for you. Before we get into it, I do want to mention that if I have to pause for a second to cough in this video, I do apologize. I'm still recovering from being ill over the last couple of days. If you saw yesterday's video, then you probably know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I do feel a little bit better, but without much further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into it. Guys, Bitcoin is currently trading around $4,007 on Coinbase anyway, and has been trading up here for the last couple of hours. As I said, Bitcoin fell over and moved all the way down here to around $3,860 or so. And as I mentioned in yesterday's video, Bitcoin fell down here, bounced, and then fell over again. And I took this as a very bearish sign for Bitcoin because Bitcoin tried to bounce, but it wasn't able to. The bears pulled it back down. But interestingly enough, the bears pulled it back down, and a few hours after I actually recorded that video, Bitcoin started actually moving to the upside and started its actual bounce. And it's good to see that Bitcoin is moving this bullish, but I really don't think that this changes a whole lot in Bitcoin's longer term technical analysis. And when I say long term here, I have to be specific. I mean over the long term being the next week or so. That's long term for the hourly chart, of course. That wouldn't be long term for the daily chart, but of course we're looking at the hourly chart. Now, interestingly enough, I also talked about something called double bottom RSI divergence in yesterday's video, and that is still as much of a mouthful today as it was yesterday, but I still think it's just about as important. Bitcoin had a double bottom down over here in the last couple of days. Now, you can say that Bitcoin came down here on a wick, on a Wixes, if you like my invention of how you're supposed to say that, the Wixes down here. I like that Bitcoin came down here on a Wix all the way down here, and Bitcoin basically set a double bottom here. Now, you can argue that this isn't a double bottom because of this wick right here, but I would say for the sake of argument that this would be a double bottom. And one thing that's interesting about this is that we see a lower bottom on the RSI, and then we see a higher bottom on the RSI. That means that we have an uptrend here on the RSI, and we have a flat level of support on the chart, on the price action. And that is what is known as double bottom RSI divergence, and that's a rather bullish sign. And I talked about in yesterday's video about how I was more bearish on Bitcoin than I was bullish on Bitcoin. But that being said, there is an argument to be made for the bulls. That's what I said yesterday, and I said that this right here might be part of it. It may be that this double bottom RSI divergence could cause one more final little bounce before we fall over, and that seems to be what's going on here, guys. And I'm not saying I called this by no stretch of the imagination. I'm certainly more bearish still than I am bullish, but I do want to point out that there was, and there always is, something that was pointing to a movement before it happened. And I'm not saying that I'm clairvoyant or anything, no one is, but the lesson I'm trying to teach here is that every time a market does something that you don't necessarily expect, I wouldn't say that I expected Bitcoin to rally this powerfully after what had happened yesterday. I mean, I thought that Bitcoin may have a larger bounce, but I didn't expect a 4% bounce here. Every time that Bitcoin or any market does something that you didn't necessarily expect, or perhaps you didn't expect it to do something as strong as it ended up doing it, you can always look back and do back technical analysis and look at things that may have caused that you didn't see, so that you can then apply that to your future technical analysis. And this double bottom RSI divergence that I talked about very well may be a good example of that. Now, with all that said, where does this actually leave Bitcoin? What is Bitcoin doing here, and what does this change about Bitcoin, if anything? Well, we need to zoom out here. I'm going to go out to the 4-hourly chart, and we'll talk about that. This is actually very interesting what this does for Bitcoin, because as you can see, Bitcoin has come up and tested a level of resistance, and that level of resistance is actually, excuse me, the former level of support here on this ascending wedge here. But you can also take that level of support and you can redraw it right here. And what we find now is that Bitcoin is now no longer in an ascending wedge, it is now in an ascending trading channel right here. Bitcoin came up here and tested this resistance and is now rejecting off of it. As you can see over the last couple of hours, Bitcoin came up here, almost perfectly rejected off of that level of resistance, but has set a new level of support in motion. So this is actually kind of the wrong color now. We'll call it white because it's neither support or resistance, it's both. But we saw Bitcoin come up there and test that as resistance now, so it's both. But we've also set a new trading channel in motion. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this for right now so it's a little more clear to see. We also don't need this pattern right there anymore. And what we see is that Bitcoin now finds itself in an ascending trading channel right here. And this is interesting because this has a lot more implications to it than an ascending wedge. The ascending wedge that we're looking at here would be a bearish pattern. That is typically bearish. It will almost always fall over. And while that was a good part of the technical analysis that I was using to predict that Bitcoin would fall over, it by no stretch of the imagination was all of it. There's a lot more bearishness in Bitcoin right now that I see in the technicals and in the fundamentals and in the market structure, excuse me, not the fundamentals, but in the market structure, the technicals and the longer term time frames, than just that ascending wedge pattern. But that being kind of invalidated is interesting. Now, the thing that we want to talk about is this ascending trading channel, because Bitcoin has been moving to the upside here over the last couple of weeks, really the last couple of months. Ever since the beginning of February or so, Bitcoin has been moving to the upside, and we haven't really seen an opportunity for Bitcoin to fall over. Now, of course, back over here in December, Bitcoin rallied rather substantially. It was about a 40% rally, if I remember correctly, about a 35% rally over here. Bitcoin had a very strong rally, and it fell over very quickly. We've seen Bitcoin move to the upside and then fell over. Bitcoin has been moving to the upside here, but hasn't had an opportunity to fall over. The bears have not had their day yet, and I think that's going to end up coming to fruition. Now, it may be that Bitcoin is just going to move up here for the next couple of days. Maybe Bitcoin's having its final hurrah. The bulls are having their final stand here and moving to the upside. At the moment, it doesn't look like the bulls are back in control. It seems to me that this little movement that we've seen here in Bitcoin is actually just kind of it's like the Alamo for the bears, or for the bulls, excuse me. It's like the bulls are trying to get their last stand in there before the bears take over. And that's not to say the bears are coming in force in the next week or so, but I do think that they're going to be coming in the next week or two, or maybe 3, because probably before that, due to all the technical analysis that we've done in just a crazy amount of quantity over the last couple of weeks. I'm not going to dive into all of it again. But there are several things that I do want to dive into in today's video, and one of them would actually have to do with the volume. And as you guys know, volume is a very important component of technical analysis, and it's very important also that when you see a market moving to the upside, that volume be moving to the upside, and also likewise when you're moving to the downside, typically volume is also moving to the downside. We saw, for example, in 2018 that when Bitcoin was moving to the downside, so too was volume. When Bitcoin was moving to the upside in 2017, so too was volume. Typically when the market is moving in one direction, so too will the volume. And you'd like to see that, because typically when you see volume increasing, you're also seeing volatility increasing, you're seeing retail investor interest increasing, you're seeing more people entering the market, which is typically a bullish thing for Bitcoin, and then that drives increased price action for Bitcoin and more valuation coming into the space. And typically the same thing is true, but in the inverse for the bearish case. When you see prices are going down, you see volume decline, you see volatility lower, you see people leave the space, you see perhaps on a longer term time frames, you see less companies adopting cryptocurrency, and you see that Bitcoin and the blockchain is not being utilized as much. Typically these things correlate, and when they do correlate, that normally is indicative of a very healthy trend. And by healthy, I mean the trend is set up the way that you would normally expect it to, and the technical analysis on it will probably work properly. But when you see those two things having dissonance between them, this is something I talk about in the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy, something similar to this anyway, the dissonance of support and resistance and the convergence of support and resistance. It's a similar thing with the dissonance of the trend in volume and the convergence of the trend in volume. When you see a trend moving to the upside, you would like to see the volume moving to the upside. But over the last couple of weeks, volume has not been moving to the upside with Bitcoin. It's actually been moving slightly to the downside. As you can see here, when you come on to TradingView, by default, volume will have a 20 moving average on it. You can come here and turn it on. You'll have to turn on volume moving average right there. I don't think it's on by default, but when you do that, you'll have this moving average moving through the volume. And as you can see, over the last several weeks, Bitcoin's volume has been gradually declining, and that's not a good thing. And part of the reason that's probably been happening is because Bitcoin's been rather stagnant. Bitcoin's been moving to the upside up until 3 days ago, Bitcoin was in an ascending wedge pattern, which is typically a bearish pattern, is typically, well, not typically, it is a type of a consolidation pattern, and you do normally see that volume drops off with that. So it's not terribly surprising that volume is dropping off, but it is important to note that Bitcoin's volume and Bitcoin's trend angle are not in alignment. And when you see volume going down, a lot of times the volume, considering how many other technicals and some fundamentals are built on top of volume, typically the volume can be a better predictor of what is going to happen than the direction of the market. And the reason for that, like I said, is because volume has a lot of things built on top of it. You have your volatility built on, in large part on top of volatility. The less volume you have, the more likely it is that some kind of bull or bear whale is going to be able to come in and just rampage through the market and buy or sell a ton of Bitcoin. You have the idea of much lower volatility and everything. It's very important that you see volume follow the market and vice versa. You want the market to follow the volume. And that is not a very bullish thing to see that volume is low right now. I want to talk about that because it's very important. A couple of other things I want to talk about have to do with levels of resistance for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is sitting under some major levels of resistance. As you guys know, I had this zone of resistance between $4,200 and $4,500 up here for the last couple of weeks. And the reason I've had that is because every time Bitcoin comes up here in between really about $4,100 and up here up into the mid 4,000s, Bitcoin comes up here, it tests resistance, and it's never able to get above it. Guys, I don't see a whole lot of bullish strength in Bitcoin right now. Bitcoin's been trending to the upside for a month now, and we've gained what, 15%, 10%? Bitcoin has gained 10%, 8% in a month. Guys, Bitcoin is not very bullish right now. I don't care how strong Bitcoin rallied yesterday. I don't care how amazing Bitcoin looks on the hourly chart right now. Bitcoin's moved 10% in a month. That's not a good thing. That's a bearish thing, in fact. The fact that Bitcoin has only moved to the upside 10% means that the bulls are obviously ever so slightly in control right now, but they're by no means in very strong control. If we compared especially to what we see back over here in earlier February, Bitcoin rallied 25% in a week and a half. That's a bullish move right there. Bitcoin is not very bullish right now, which means that as we approach these levels of resistance up here between $4,100, $4,200, $4,300, Bitcoin just simply isn't going to have the strength to start breaking them. Bitcoin may have a little bit more bullish momentum now because of what happened in the last 24 hours, but Bitcoin simply does not have the strength to go up here and start breaking these major levels of resistance, like some of these levels that we saw at $4,100, for example. Let's get the right color here. Bitcoin is not going to be able to break these levels. I simply don't think so. There's a major level of resistance right there. There are many other major levels of resistance that Bitcoin is currently facing, and I don't think Bitcoin can get through any of them right now, considering how strong the bulls don't seem to be. With all that said, guys, there's always that potential that Bitcoin does something that we don't expect. There's always that potential that Bitcoin does go ahead and rally straight through these levels of resistance and Bitcoin goes straight to the moon. If you want to believe that and you find technical analysis that proves that, or at least gives you evidence for that, because you can't ever really prove anything in chart reading, of course. If you find evidence for that, then go right ahead and do that. But based on the technical analysis that I see, based on the market structure that I'm looking at, based on everything that I can tell, based on my experience and based on my technical analysis, and based on what a lot of other people in the cryptocurrency space are saying, because just like you guys, I don't only do my own technical analysis, I also look at other people's opinions to get their own takes on those. It's not looking very bullish for Bitcoin. And that's not to say that Bitcoin is in a bad state. That's not to say that Bitcoin is in a terrible position. That's not to be doom and gloom on Bitcoin. That's simply to say that I think Bitcoin is going to start moving downward from here over the next week or so. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, and as I'll continue to say, there's always a potential that Bitcoin moves to the upside a little bit, has a little bit of a bullish bounce. Guys, I wouldn't be totally surprised if Bitcoin came all the way up to maybe $4,100 and then started falling over. Maybe it comes up here and tests this uptrend of resistance once more, and then we start falling over. I don't personally think we're going to break this downtrend of resistance, but that very well may happen over the next couple of days. No matter what happens in the next week or two, I think Bitcoin's going to be falling over here and breaking some levels of support. And guys, I know I haven't looked at a whole lot of technical indicators today, but I did obviously before I recorded this video and in the recording of many other videos during my technical analysis. And the technical indicators do seem to be agreeing with me right now. A lot of them are rather bearish, or they are looking like they will be bearish relatively soon. For example, the daily MACD is currently bearish. It is curving bullish again, and we may see a bullish cross on that, but I'm not convinced about how long that will last. Down here on the 4-hourly chart, we see something like the bullish MACD cross on the 4-hourly, but we also see the stochastic RSI and RSI are well into the overbought territories and look like they may be starting to curve back down in relation to the previous, in relation to the recent bearishness that's come out of Bitcoin over the last couple of hours. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much what I want to talk about in today's video. I want to talk about this little bullish rally that we've seen in Bitcoin here over the last 24 hours or so, and the fact that Bitcoin has performed rather well over the last 24 hours. But you do expect that to happen, guys. There's always going to be rallies in bear markets, and there's always going to be downtrends in bull markets. That's the way that works. Markets are cyclical. I think I've said that a million times here on the channel, and it's important to understand because sometimes markets do move bullish when you think they're going to move bearish, and sometimes they do move bearish when you think they're going to move bullish. A lot of times that will happen, and you have to be prepared for that, which is why it's so important for you to understand the way that the market moves, why the market moves as it does, and be able to use your own technical analysis to go and predict what the market will do with at least some degree of certainty so that you can then be prepared for what the market does, make trades based on what you think the market will do, and protect yourself when the market doesn't do what you expect it to. And guys, that is of course why I made the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy. That link is in the description. You guys have heard me talk about it enough. I'm very happy with the product. If you're interested, go right ahead and check it out. I would appreciate it. Maybe that'll be your sick gift to Jeb. Of course, I obviously feel a lot better today because my voice is doing better. I do appreciate you guys giving me all the support and the love in the comment section and on the community page. And interestingly enough here, as we wrap the video up, look at that. Bitcoin is moving to the downside. Bitcoin is down about $10 from where we started the video. I was about to wrap up, but maybe we'll let this video drag out for a minute or two, see what Bitcoin does here. Maybe we'll catch the fall off here on video. Anyway, guys, like I said, I do appreciate the support that you guys have given me, and I do apologize for missing the last couple of days as I was very sick. My voice is doing quite a bit better today. I didn't have to take one of those pause breaks. I was in a coughing fit during part of yesterday's video. Anyway, guys, it doesn't look like Bitcoin is going to go ahead and crash on camera for us, but it very well may by the time this video goes live. If it does, that would be very humorous. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I do want to thank each and every single one of you for watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.